Learn how a writer can hide a weak argument by distracting the reader.
What do you mean when you say that writers might distract readers?
Good question. Let me answer by using an example. Suppose I asked a student, let's call her Donna, to write an essay taking a position on the following proposal. Students in our school should be allowed to leave campus during lunch. No matter whether Donna supports or opposes the proposal, her job as a writer is to develop an argument and support it with clear and logical evidence. However, some writers, through carelessness or laziness or even dishonesty, fail to provide reasonable evidence to show the truth of their position. Instead, they distract readers from the weakness of their argument with simple errors in logic.
Can you give an example of those errors?
Sure. Let's say that Donna takes this position.
Students at our school should be allowed to leave campus at lunch.
She could build her argument around solid reasons, like pointing out that allowing students to leave would free up more space and reduce lines in the school cafeteria. Instead, Donna defends her position in this way.
Think about it. There are only two ways of looking at the issue. Either we should be allowed to leave campus at lunch, or the school must do away with the lunch period entirely and end the school day early. Surely no one would want to keep us from enjoying a lunch break.
Of course, this either-or statement is meant to mislead the reader into thinking that there is a problem or dilemma. How do I choose between two options? But there is no dilemma as Donna describes it. There are clearly other options beyond the two suggested. We call this error in logic a false dilemma.
Are there other types of distractions besides the one you just described?
Yes. Along with the false dilemma, you should be aware of several other ways writers intentionally or unintentionally distract readers. In the first of these, the argument from ignorance, Donna might try the following approach.
Well, since no one has ever proven that it would be better if we stayed here on campus during lunch, then it's obvious that we should be allowed to leave.
Well, no, it's not obvious. In fact, it's silly to assume that because something hasn't been proven true, then it's false. Just because no one has proven that students should stay on campus during lunch, we cannot assume that staying on campus is wrong and leaving campus is right. In other words, ignorance of the rightness of something doesn't necessarily make it wrong, just as ignorance of its wrongness doesn't always make it right. An argument built on ignorance is no argument at all.
That sounds reasonable. What about the other distractions?
The next one is called slippery slope. Think about what that name suggests. What happens when you try to walk down a hill in the rain? The grass will be wet, and if you slip, you'll find it almost impossible to keep from sliding all the way down that slippery slope. Now imagine Donna arguing her position in that way, where one bad thing leads to something worse.
We should leave campus during lunch because if we have to eat in the cafeteria, we'll have to stand in long lines to get our pizza and french fries. And some of us may not have time to eat. And if we don't eat lunch day after day after day, some of us might suffer from malnutrition and might even die.
This argument starts with students eating in the cafeteria and ends in their deaths. Now that's a slippery slope. When a writer presents a series of increasingly bad consequences, we should be able to look at the final event, in this case, death, and point out that it need not occur as a consequence of eating in the cafeteria.
Sounds like you would have to be pretty desperate to resort to the slippery slope argument, right?
Right. And here's one more that's harder to detect, but just as wrong-headed. Once again, Donna wants to convince her readers that students should be allowed to leave campus. To support that idea, she asks her readers the following question.
Don't you support freedom and the right of students to leave campus during lunch?
Now let's think about these two separate ideas Donna is asking the reader to accept. The reader supports freedom. The reader supports the right of students to leave campus. Donna connects these unrelated ideas and expects the reader to accept both as true. But it's possible, of course, that the reader could accept the first point and reject the second. Donna's error in thinking is called a complex question. It's one final way that writers sometimes distract readers from the evidence that every good argument requires.